my kitchen. Today I am going to try a recipe I've always wanted to try, but haven't yet because it kind of scares me just a little, which makes no sense. I've done things just as hard, or actually much harder. Looking at the recipe, it looks pretty easy actually. I don't know what has taken me so long, but it's just not something I've ever done. So it's focaccia, and that is an Italian bread, and there's so many different toppings you could put on the top. You can make it very plain. You can put rosemary, olive oil, and leave it like that. But some people, whoa, which you should have already seen in the presentation, really make it gorgeous on the top. I mean, it's a work of art. So being true to my style, I'm gonna try that. So I'm gonna go from never having made it before to trying to make it and make it as fancy as I can. I don't know how this will turn out, but let's give it a shot. Okay, so first let me tell you the ingredients we're going to need. So the basic focaccia ingredients. All right, and I'm cheating because, I gotta read it off my sheet. We're gonna need 2/3 cup of warm water, not hot, because this is going in our yeast and it will kill the yeast, which is actually kind of alive and active. Once we get it going, it won't rise. Things won't rise if your water's too hot or too cold. So 2/3 cup warm water, 1 tablespoon of dry active yeast, and I'm sorry I keep banging the mixing bowl. 1 tablespoon dry active yeast, 1 tablespoon of honey, 2.5 cups of bread flour, and in your list of ingredients it says divided, which means total you'll need 2.5 cups of bread flour, which is different than all-purpose flour, bread flour. But we're going to use some of it here and some of it there, so that's why it says divided. So 2.5 cups total, but we're going to use it different amounts in different places. 1 3/4 cup of room temperature water. We'll get to that later. 9 tablespoons of olive oil, so that's a good bit of olive oil. That's also divided. And you can do that to taste. If you like more, you like less, there's room to adjust in this. 3 cups of all-purpose flour. So we've got bread flour and all-purpose flour. And 1 tablespoon of salt. Okay, so let's begin with the first part. Okay, so the first part, as with so many breads that require yeast, you need to put the yeast in the water and give it some kind of sugar that kind of feeds it and it gets foamy. So let's do that first. So I thought I had everything ready. Clearly I did not. So we need 2/3 cup of warm water. So I've got my warm water in a bowl here. So this is a 1/3 cup measuring cup, so obviously I'm going to need 2. So 2/3 cup of warm water. Okay. And to that we add 1 tablespoon of active yeast. So one of these little packets that you buy, usually 3 in a row in a grocery store. Now you can also get it in a jar and just measure it that way. That's fine. This is a tablespoon. I tend to have these just laying around, but the more and more I cook, the more I'm like, I need a little canister, because sometimes you need partial ones of these. Anyway, this takes 1 package. Okay, so we got warm water and we have the yeast. To this, it needs some sugar to kind of feed it. So we need a tablespoon of honey. Tablespoon of honey. And the best way to get the honey off of there is just kind of stir a little bit. And we're going to need, for now, only 1/2 cup of bread flour. Okay, so I'm going to, before I put that bread flour in, ooh, almost spilled it. I'm going to just kind of stir this around. And I want to show you the difference, what it's going to look like before and after that yeast becomes activated. So it's kind of just like a dormant plant just sitting in the packet, but when you put it with the water and you give it some kind of sugar to feed it, then it gets foamy. But for right now, sorry I'm being loud. Okay, so right now it just looks like muddy water. Okay, it's just got little granules of yeast in there. So I'm going to go ahead and switch over to a whisk. I'm going to stir that. Pardon me, I'm going to be loud for a second. Okay, now just water. I got all the clumps of yeast kind of broken up. And to this, I'm going to add only a half cup of bread flour. Bread flour, not all-purpose flour, bread flour. It's a different amount of gluten in it. Okay, so we're going to put that to the side. We're going to stir this together. Let me see if you can see that. Try to get the lumps out of it. Okay, so this is what that looks like. Let me show you close up. And we're going to let that sit. Our directions say to stir it all together, cover it with plastic, and let it sit for 20 to 30 minutes. So I'm going to pull out some plastic here from my drawer. Cover the bowl with plastic. Okay, we're going to wait 20 to 30 minutes, and then we're going to come back and add some more things and get going on our focaccia. Okay, well that is the end of our 30 minutes waiting for our yeast to get all foamy and rising. I'm going to take the plastic wrap off. I'm going to gently set it to the side because I'm going to use it again after the next step. Okay, so that's over there. And this is what it looks like. A lot like before, but it's slightly bigger and it looks oatmeal, with lack of a better word. Okay, so to this we are going to add 1 3/4 cup of room temperature water. So when I first started everything else, I went ahead and I got water from the tap and just tried to make it as room temperature as I could, and then I just let the bowl sit there. So we have 1 3/4 cup of just room temperature water. So that goes in the bowl. And then we have 5 tablespoons of olive oil, which is almost exactly 1/3 of a cup. So I'm just putting 1/3 of a cup in there. And then 2 different types of flour. We need 2 cups of bread flour. So I've already measured and I've put it here. 2 cups of bread flour and 3 cups of all-purpose flour. Remember, the difference between them is just different amount of gluten, so there'll be different elasticities, which means different textures. Okay, and a tablespoon of kosher salt. It took me probably too many years, so that oil is still pulling there. It took me a while to realize, growing up, I thought kosher salt meant just the way it was ground, like it was either more coarse or finer, but no. It's that a rabbi prayed over it. That's what makes it kosher. But this is a coarser salt, so tablespoon of salt. Almost made a mess there. Okay, so I could mix this with a spoon, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to mix it with my stand mixer and a dough hook. So give me just one moment and let me incorporate that and I'll be right back. Okay, we are all incorporated now. You can see it doesn't look smooth and spongy, it just looks together. So what we're going to do is we're going to knead that by hand. I've already sanitized my work area here. So I'm going to take some all-purpose flour and I'm going to just give it a sprinkle, so it doesn't stick to my sanitized counter. And then I'm going to turn all of that out onto my floured surface. For this next part, make sure all jewelry is off, unless you want to pick dough out of it. That's not fun. I've done it before. Okay, so let me angle you just a little more. Scoot the camera back. That works too. Okay, so I'm going to put some flour on my hands to keep the dough from sticking to me, and I'm just going to pick up the sides and the back. Oh, you need it to be here so you can see it. Okay, so that's a little too much flour, so I'm going to stick some of it over there. So we're just going to do this. There's no set time, just until it looks kind of spongy. And you'll see what I mean in just a moment. Oh, now we need some of that flour back. Oh, sticking. Okay. Okay, more flour away. Because you can see when the outside looks like it's too full of flour, cakey, like it looks like that's not going to get incorporated, I just scoot some out of the way. So we just go back and forth and just folding it on each other, on itself, and smush, and smush. Bring it back to you and push down with your heels is what we're doing. Okay, now that looks more spongy, okay? That's what we want. Okay, so I'm gonna put that on a little bit of flour here for just a second because we don't want that to stick to our bowl. We want it to be free to rise. So we're going to coat this mixing bowl. No use stirring up another bowl, right? Okay, so we're going to coat it with a little bit of olive oil, about a tablespoon of olive oil. And we're just gonna, some bottles have these little plastic spout things that keep it from going everywhere, but I still like to put my thumb over it so it drizzles just a bit better so you don't pour so much. Notice I didn't measure that, but it's about a tablespoon. And I'm going to go all around the bowl with it. So our dough doesn't stick, and the excess I'm going to pour out because obviously that was more than a tablespoon. So the excess I'm pouring out into my leftover measuring cup. Okay, I'm going to pick up my dough. Plop. And just plop it back in, and I'm going to take a little bit of that oil and put it over the top because I don't want it to dry out. We are going to put plastic wrap back over the top, but I like just a little bit, okay, maybe more than just a little bit, because focaccia is one of those, but like I wouldn't do this to like a yeast bread, sandwich bread, white bread, whatever, but focaccia has a lot of oil in it, so I'm not afraid of putting more oil in here. Again, I've never done this before. That could be terribly wrong. Okay, so I'm going to cover it once again with our plastic wrap. And it says to put it in a warm place for about an hour or two. Did I read that right? Yes, for an hour or two. So that same plastic wrap that we used before is on it now. I have my oven preheating for another video I'm going to do for you. So this can sit there for a while. Okay, we'll be back in 2 hours. Okay, so we have let it rise, and the next step looks a little funny. It tells us to punch it down all over because our dough has risen. We're going to punch it down all over, and then we're going to put it just kind of in a glop on their oiled pan. So I have a pan here, it's got lots of oil on it. So we're just gonna put it there in the glop, and then we're gonna cover it with plastic wrap and let that rest for about, let me read it, it says 10 to 20 minutes. Okay, so first punch it down. I don't know why we need to do that since we're gonna turn up, but anyway, we're gonna punch it down all over. That's kind of fun. Doesn't seem to change a whole lot. Okay, then we're gonna just pour it out in a glop. We're not gonna spread it out yet. We're going to cover it with our plastic wrap. And I'm just using that same sheet that I had over my bowl earlier. We're going to keep it a bit airtight, and we're going to let that rest for about 20 minutes, and then we'll come back and spread it out. Okay, so it said to wait 10 to 20 minutes, so that's what I've done. I'm going to angle the camera down now so you can watch. So we first take the plastic wrap off, and then it tells us to just flatten it all out. So that's what we're going to do. We're just going to smush it all out, which feels just like pizza dough right now. It's very stretchy, so it's really not a problem to get it all out to the corners. It does, because it's elastic a little bit, it wants to come out of the corner. See how like, stay, and it shrinks back a little bit. So I gotta work with that a little bit. Smush it from the inside out so it stays on the edges. Okay, and there we have it. All stretched out. And guess what? We wait again. It tells us to cover it in plastic wrap. Do we drizzle it with oil now? No. Right now it says just cover it in plastic wrap. So that's what we're doing. One piece here. Because my plastic wrap is almost wide enough, but not quite. I'm gonna need 2 pieces. Maybe. The other piece wanted to wrinkle on me. I had it hanging on my door over here so nicely, and then it's not. Not straight at all. That's okay. We only need it to cover this area here. Okay, so I'm gonna fold the plastic wrap over all of it. Make sure it's all covered. And then it tells us to leave this for 1 to 2 hours to let it rise. And then we come back and we decorate it and put the dimpling in it and the oil and decorate it. So we'll be back in an hour or 2. Okay, so we have waited and now it is time to do the final step before we bake. So this step requires us to take off the plastic. We're going to use our fingers and dimple, because that's what all the focaccia breads have in common. Not only are the ingredients the same, but they take their fingers and they dimple it all on the top to where it's got all these cute little divots, and then you layer it with olive oil, just a thin layer of olive oil. Now, they can be very plain, or we can get pretty fancy with it, and that's what we're gonna try today. And I've got lots and lots of different vegetables and herbs on my counter here. And we're going to see if we can make some kind of flower looking scene. Okay, so let me lower it down. And by the way, I just started preheating the oven. So when we are ready to put this in, it's ready for us. So let me angle this down and scoot back so you can see what we're going to do here. Me, I got all these things. Make sure you can see. Okay, because you don't need to see me quite as much as you need to see this right now. All right, so we're going to take the plastic off so it's risen all the way up and touching the plastic. That can go in the trash because we're finished with it. Okay, with clean hands, I just washed my hands. We're going to just poke all over the dough. So we're just going to, oh, it's sticking. So that's something I didn't expect. I've got it rising, like sticking to my hands. So maybe I should do this with oiled hands, because it's wanting to stick to my hands. And there we go. Yay! That's what the problem was. So it was sticking to my hands and looking like it was creating waves that were coming up instead of dimply holes in it. So now we have dimply holes in it, all over it. And that is what it looks like focaccia. Okay, so we're going to give it a layering of oil here. Just a bit. And then, since we're touching it all over with our hands anyway, I'm going to spread that out with my hands. Make sure we get all of it oiled so we don't dry out on the edges too. Okay. Well, that part looks pretty good. It looks like focaccia bread now. So the only focaccia bread that I've had looks like this, only with rosemary and salt or different herbs. But we're going to go all out today. So I'll be going in and off camera because I've got all these things down here. But I'm gonna try to make it as much like the video as we saw. So first I'm gonna start with some fresh dill. I bought it in a plastic container like this. I've washed it, let it lay out on the counter. But dill kind of looks like little trees, and that's what we're going to use it as. So I'm going to put some dill there for a tree. Forest of dill. And then I'm going to put some on the other end. Some little tiny bushes of dill. So, at least in my mind, these look like trees and the smaller one more like bushes. Okay, so there's some dill. And next, chives. So chives are like long, thin, oniony herbs. So we'll have some of those. Well, that's a very, very long one. Went right off the pan. And then we'll have chives of all different lengths because there are also going to be some flower stems as well. So, and to put different ones here, I want different heights because I also have some bell pepper. That's what the word I was looking for. Cut up to look like flowers. I've got tomato halves. So I've got tomato half here, and I've got some yellow bell pepper I've cut into triangles. So we're going to make that look like a sun-ish. So I'm going to put the little triangles just radiating. Well, that gets in the way of this bigger tree. We'll put that over here. So there's our sun, and the ends of the bell pepper, see how it looks like a flower? So we're gonna put those on here. So those look like flowers. We're going to take off rosemary leaves, just pluck them off and put them down here for little tiny bits of grass. This is just fun. It's just meant to not look like any particular thing other than what you just want it to look like. If you have a vision in mind, go for it. If not, just put things on there and see what looks good to you. I'm going a little heavy on this because I love rosemary. Okay, I'm just putting it all around here. I'm going to do another chive flower over here. I'm going to dot it with some tomatoes. You can hear that beeper, that is the oven saying it is as hot as we want it. So it's 400 degrees now. Okay, and I've got some radishes. Thinly sliced. I like how the video that we saw had them coming up and almost looking like speech bubbles. I'll do this in a few different places. Okay, and I have some asparagus too, but I don't think it really needs it. I think it looks a little too busy. So let me turn that around so you can see what I've done. Okay, maybe just a few more rays of sun here. Make our sun a little bigger. And I'm kind of okay with that. I don't feel like it really needs much of anything else. Though I am going to put just a little bit of rosemary here, because if you're the person that gets this piece, it's got nothing on it. I'm going to just drizzle, sprinkle, whatever word you like to use. I guess drizzle would be for a liquid, right? So we're going to sprinkle some rosemary around. Okay, we don't want too much busyness going on. It's already pretty busy as it is. Okay, so I'm going to lay down the herbs, because even though they're prettier like this when they're off the focaccia, in the baking process, we don't want those to burn. We want them to still look good, and they'll have a much better chance if they're lying against our focaccia. Okay, now we're going to drizzle it with olive oil, and even though the recipe doesn't quite say it, I'm also going to drizzle it with some salt. Okay, we've drizzled it with oil there. Got some coarse salt here. I'm going to put just some in my hand. Not a lot. Just to sprinkle it around. And there is our gardenscape focaccia. Okay, so now we're going to bake it in the oven. First 15 minutes, then we're going to turn the pan around, and then we're going to cook it for 7 to 10 more minutes. Okay, so we'll do that, and then I'll show you what it looks like when it's all finished. Okay, so just kidding. I said I'd come back when it was finished baking, but I just remembered I forgot mushrooms. And while I'm not a huge fan of mushrooms, I love the way they look. So I want to put some mushrooms on our focaccia. I know it looks a little busy and it's not like it really needed something, but I just think they're pretty. Okay, there we go. I got some mushrooms on there. Now I'm gonna bake it for 15 minutes and come back. And here we have it. Here is our gardenscape focaccia, just piping hot from the oven. So our directions said to bake it for 15 minutes, turn it in the oven, and do 7 to 10 more minutes. I still found it was looking very blonde on the top, so I gave it another 10 minutes. So that was a lot more than the directions said, which made me a bit nervous, but it looks perfectly cooked now to me. The edges are firm but not burnt, and we got a little bit of browning here in the center. So all in all, I'd say it's a success. Now, when you go to slice it, If you get a slice that has all of that dill on it, that, you know, make the pretty little trees and bushes and shrubs, I would suggest peeling that off, or at least some of it, because that's going to be an overpowering amount of dill. But if you're a pickle lover, go for it. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you tried this, because this was a lot of fun. Talk to you again soon.